They seemed like ordinary people. A small, forgotten village hidden deep among Oregon's northern pines. A few dozen houses, a wooden church without a bell, and a store with a peeling sign that read, General Goods. But in June of 1983, when a routine census was being conducted in Lynn County, Raven Hollow could not be found on any map. It wasn't listed in any registry. And yet, there were photographs, letters, testimonies from those who swore they had been there. According to former road engineer Richard Lowell, the last dirt road leading into the valley where the town once stood had been chained off in 1979. It was said to be due to a landslide, but no such landslides were ever recorded in geological reports. Lowell later wrote that shortly after the road was closed, men in plain clothes visited his home, warning him not to speak about Raven Hollow. They were calm, he wrote in a letter to his daughter, but their eyes looked like they already knew you'd disappear. The earliest mentions of the settlement appear in registry books from the 1920s. At the time, it was a small farming valley at the foot of the Silver Ridge Mountains, founded by settlers from the state of Maine. 22 families in total. According to county archives, from 1932 to 1956, it had its own school, parish, and even a small paper printing press. The last entry in the school logbook is dated October 11, 1956. After that, nothing. Officially, Raven Hollow vanished from all maps after 1961. But in 1983, an unopened box of negatives was discovered in the Salem Tribune archives. On the lid, in faded pencil, was written, Raven Hollow, 1959. Evacuation? The films were developed that summer. The images were washed out black and white. An abandoned street, rows of houses with curtains drawn, a church without a cross, and a man in priest's robes standing at the gate. He was looking directly into the camera, the light falling in such a way that his face could not be seen. Reporters tried to identify who took the photographs. Inside the box was a note marked only with initials, J.W. Later, it was assumed that the photographer was Joseph Wilson, a local correspondent for the Oregon State Herald. Wilson disappeared on December 14, 1959, while returning from an assignment in Lynn County. His car was found abandoned along Highway 222, 20 kilometers from the supposed entrance to Raven Hollow Valley. Inside, a roll of film, a notebook, and a scorched map with a hand-drawn circle and the words, Don't enter. According to official records, the case was investigated by Sheriff Henry Marlowe. In the state archive, his final report reads, No sign of foul play. Wilson likely lost orientation. Locals say fog rolls down there sometimes. Thick, gray, smells like iron. 3 months later, Sheriff Marlowe resigned and left the state. His home in Salem was later claimed by the municipality. His family never came forward. In 1983, journalist Daniel Mason reopened the Wilson case. A young archivist and graduate of the University of Oregon's History Department, Mason had come across that same box of negatives. In his recovered notes, he wrote, At first, I thought it was just misplaced material, but the more I read, the more I realized. This wasn't just an abandoned town. Something made them leave. Or stay forever, Mason began his own investigation. He interviewed elderly residents of nearby counties, especially those living near the Silver Ridge Mountains. Some remembered Raven Hollow, others denied such a place ever existed. But one woman, Agnes Burke, age 79, agreed to speak. She claimed she had lived there for 2 months in 1955 with her husband and children. We left at night, she said. People started to change. They stopped recognizing us, even the children. And at night, from the hills, you could hear someone praying, but not in English. Her testimony was recorded on tape. Only fragments survived. Static, her trembling voice, a few discernible words. Inside, water, blood on the walls. A week later, Agnes Burke died of a heart attack. Doctors ruled it natural, but near the end of the tape she can be heard whispering, If he asks about the map, don't answer. Never answer. After her death, Mason became obsessed with Raven Hollow. He sent requests to municipalities, archives, geological offices, always receiving the same reply. No such settlement appears in our records. However, at the Oregon Land Department, Mason discovered a faded photocopy of a 1919 land permit. It listed Raven Hollow Settlement as an approved development. Signed, Thomas G. Wren. That name appeared nowhere else. By the fall of 1983, Mason had drafted his first article, a piece titled, The Town That Isn't on the Map. It was never published. Mason disappeared on November 3, 1983. He was last seen in the university library, reviewing newspaper reels from the 1950s. On his desk, police later found his notes, and a single page typed on a mechanical typewriter. They called him Thomas, but in the church, his name was spoken differently. According to library records, Daniel Mason had indeed requested microfilms of the Oregon State Herald from November 1959, the same period when Joseph Wilson vanished. What he managed to read remains unknown. When archivists later attempted to open that same film reel, they found the strip inside melted, as if exposed to fire. Mason lived alone in an old house on the outskirts of Eugene. After his disappearance, police found a tape recorder still running in his bedroom. The cassette contained nothing but faint static, a soft crackling sound, like distant electrical interference. Neighbors claimed they saw headlights outside his house the previous night. Even though Mason's own car hadn't worked for weeks, the engine was under repair. Inside one of his desk drawers was an envelope marked RH. Inside, 3 photographs. The first showed a stone marker with the faded inscription, Raven Hollow. The second, an old church, the same one seen in the 1959 negatives. The third, a patch of scorched ground covered with ash, beneath which rows of wooden crosses could be seen. On the back of the third photo, written in ink, "They're not underground." Their inside police were unable to determine where the photographs were taken, but an expert confirmed that the film stock and chemical composition matched those produced in the late 1970s, meaning someone had visited Raven Hollow long after it supposedly vanished. In December 1983, Salem Tribune correspondent James Edwards, a close friend of Mason's, decided to go to Lynn County himself. He left his editor a short note. If he was right, the place still exists. Sheriff's reports indicate Edwards left Salem on December 9th. He was last seen at a gas station in Miller Creek around noon, asking an elderly attendant about a road that once led to a valley. The man reluctantly replied that the road had been dug up after a flood and added, "You shouldn't go there. Not in winter. Even the animals don't come back." Later that evening, Edwards was reportedly seen again, 20 miles north of the Silver Ridge Mountains. He stopped at a roadside diner called Blue Finch, where he left a tip and asked if there was anywhere nearby to stay the night. The owner, Ellen Hope, later told police, "He looked tired, but calm. Said he was writing about abandoned settlements. I gave him a map, but he just shook his head. These maps won't help." He was never seen again. The following spring, in 1984, a group of geography students from Eugene University were conducting field research in that region. One of them, Jason Crawford, stumbled upon an old Kodak Retina camera near the dried-out bed of a stream. Inside the camera, a full roll of undeveloped film. When processed, the images revealed thick fog, a wooden church, and the shadow of a man standing in the doorway. In one frame, part of a face could be seen, half covered by some kind of fabric. Experts later confirmed the camera belonged to James Edwards. Officially, the case was never linked to Mason's disappearance, but one curious detail appeared in the police report. All negatives, except one, were fogged and overexposed. The final image showed a road, and far in the mist, the silhouette of a sign. Faint words could just be made out on its surface. "Welcome to Raven Hollow." It was around this time that a new name appeared in the archival records, Professor Harold Sloan, a lecturer in comparative theology. Sloan had long studied the vanished religious communities of Oregon. After learning about Mason's materials, he wrote to the newspaper, "It is possible that Raven Hollow was not merely a settlement, but a colony of a little-known sect of early Protestant reformers, calling themselves the Congregation of the Last Word. Sloan claimed he had discovered a fragment of a manuscript attributed to a priest named Thomas G. Wren, a name strikingly similar to that of Raven Hollow's founder, Thomas G. Wren. The handwriting was old, uneven, and the passages deeply unsettling. The voices return on the night when the lights go out. We do not pray. We repeat. We are the vessel through which they will awaken. Sloan's research was never published. A few months later, he resigned from the university, citing poor health. Colleagues recalled he had become withdrawn, refusing to leave his office and demanding that the windows be boarded shut. When the room was later cleared, a single sheet of paper was found on his desk, containing one line: "Do not look behind the church. Never look behind the church." Meanwhile, the Salem Tribune continued to receive anonymous letters. Most were nonsensical, fragments of phrases, citations, and threats. But one envelope, dated March 1984, contained a photograph of a typewritten page. He woke beneath the earth. But now the earth is us. On the reverse side was a postmark from Albany, Oregon, 40 miles from the presumed location of Raven Hollow. The sender was never identified. By July 1984, the case was officially closed. Yet among the police archives remained a copy of an internal memorandum. If anyone reopens inquiries about Raven Hollow, route all requests through headquarters. No comment to the press. Access level restricted. In the spring of 1985, a sealed package with no return address was delivered to the Lynn County Police Archives. On the envelope, it read, Mason materials. Do not open without state archive authorization. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, partially charred at the edges. On the first page, the name, Daniel Mason. The following pages were written in uneven handwriting, some lines crossed out. November 3rd. The road ended at an old bridge. The remaining planks were rotting into the water. On the other side, only fog and the smell of earth. I feel as if the air is different here. At night, I heard a bell, as if underwater. The following entries became increasingly fragmented. The map does not match. I have been walking for 3 hours, but the sun hasn't moved. A crow circles above the road. It does not leave. Sometimes it seems it does not fly. It just hangs in the air. Found a sign, Raven Hollow County, almost worn away, but the letters appear as if recently traced. Nearby, stone steps leading downward. No sound except the wind. The ground beneath my feet feels soft, as if hollow. The handwriting trembles. The ink smears. I hear them speaking. Not words, whispers. At first I thought it was water below, but there is no river. Only darkness and the smell of ash. I saw the church. It leans, as if half sunken. Windows are boarded with wooden crosses. A burned handprint on the door. They did not leave. They are waiting. The final entry is dated November 4th, 1983. I opened the door. Inside, no floor, only depth. They are singing, and I understand the words. They were not calling him. They were calling me. After this line, several strokes smear across the page, as if the hand slipped. On the last sheet, a clear palm print is pressed into the paper. Thermal analysis showed the page was exposed to extreme heat, yet adjacent pages remained intact. Police never found Mason or the church he described. A 1986 expedition surveyed approximately 12 square kilometers of the area. No evidence of buildings, bridges, or settlements was found. However, satellite images over the northern ridge revealed an anomalous dark patch of forest, a section where sunlight seemed absorbed by the earth. That same year, the Lynn County Archives recorded another anomaly. On the microfilm shelf containing Mason's materials, a new file appeared labeled Raven Hollow, classified. No employee admitted placing it there. When the archive director opened the folder, it contained a single sheet of paper. Typed in the center, "They're still singing." After the disappearances of Daniel Mason and James Edwards, the Raven Hollow case was officially closed. Yet the Oregon State Archives continued to record anomalies linked to the valley. In the spring of 1984, Professor Harold Sloan became involved in the case. He gained access to microfilms, letters, and Mason's notebooks. Sloan believed that Raven Hollow was not merely an abandoned settlement, but an experimental religious colony, a precursor to a cult known as the Congregation of the Last Word. Among the archival materials, Sloan discovered references to a ceremony held during full moons. He who speaks the words inside the church sees everyone at once, both living and dead. Their faces no longer remain the same. They become a vessel for the one who comes. Sloan began collecting testimonies from locals who had accidentally wandered into the surrounding forests. One such witness, a forest ranger named Paul Drake, reported, "I heard singing at night. Not human, but from the depths. The wind carried words I couldn't understand, but I recognized them from Mason's journals. The same phrases. I ran. The path disappeared as I tried to return." In the archives, Sloan recorded conversations with other nearby residents. "As a child, I saw people from Raven Hollow walk into the forest and never return. My parents told me, 'Don't look that way.' But sometimes, at night, I hear their voices. They call my name. Witness from a neighboring village." In 1985, a team of geography students led by Jason Crawford attempted to survey the area. During the expedition, they discovered remnants of wooden structures overgrown with moss and strange stone markers carved with symbols. None of the symbols matched any known alphabet. Crawford wrote in his field diary, "These are not inscriptions. They are formulas. I feel they are meant to be perceived, not by the eyes, but by the mind." The students also noted unusual animal behavior. Deer and birds avoided certain sections of the forest, and in the foggy mornings, footsteps could be heard where no one walked. Locals claimed that the valley was always covered in thick fog, even in clear weather. No meteorological report could explain the phenomenon. By June 1985, Sloan produced a confidential report for a limited circle of scholars. If these materials are taken literally, Raven Hollow represents a point where the material and immaterial worlds intersect. People who lived there either left or remained inside in a form that cannot be described in words. The archives contain a fragment of Mason's journal describing his final expedition into the valley. I descended the stone steps. Below, darkness, the smell of ash and wet earth. I heard whispers repeating my own thoughts. The light did not fall on the ground, it dissolved into the air. In front of me appeared a figure in priest's robes. His face, impossible to discern. He said, "You sought us? Now we are inside you." I tried to run, but the air was thick, like water. When I awoke, I was already on the other side of the forest. The church was gone. The road was gone. Only the fog remained. Witnesses reported that anyone who entered the valley returned changed. People could not describe what they saw. Words seemed insufficient. Ordinary geographic landmarks disappeared, as if the forest itself warped space. In 1986, an archaeological expedition observed a strange phenomenon. The ground at the former village site was soft, as if hollow beneath. All wooden structures had vanished. Yet on a small section of the forest, sensors detected vibrations resembling a heartbeat or breathing. All animals avoided this area. The archives preserved an audio cassette recording. "They call my name." I hear voices inside my head. I cannot move. The wind carries their singing. They say, "I must stay." Lost words, Daniel Mason. By late 1986, Raven Hollow had become a subject of restricted files in both the state and federal archives. No official expedition ever returned from the valley with conclusive evidence of buildings or inhabitants. Yet reports continued. Sensors, satellite anomalies, and eyewitness accounts all pointed to activity within the supposed empty land. One of the final testimonies comes from field technician Marion Keene, who surveyed the northern ridge in October 1986. Her recorded statement reads, "I walked into the fog, trying to map the terrain. The compass spun uncontrollably. I saw shapes moving. Not human, not animal. When I turned, the forest seemed to rearrange itself. I heard voices, soft and urgent, speaking my name. Something pushed me forward. I ran, but the path behind vanished. I cannot explain what I saw, only that it was not part of the natural world." Other reports, collected by Professor Sloan and later by archivists, described recurring patterns. Fog that did not dissipate, sounds of singing or chanting from underground, and fleeting glimpses of figures at the edge of perception. A final piece of evidence was discovered in 1987 among Mason's recovered notes. A single line typed on an otherwise blank sheet. "They are inside. They have always been inside. And now, so am I. Since that time, no human has returned from the core of Raven Hollow. The valley is officially uninhabited, unmarked on maps, and avoided by locals. Yet satellite imagery, restricted archival reports, and anecdotal accounts suggest it is far from empty. Some believe the truth was buried not in the ground, but within those who entered. Others warn, anyone who seeks Raven Hollow may find it, but never leave the same. The case remains open in classified files, an anomaly of geography and human perception. As the archivist's notes conclude, Raven Hollow is a place where the line between living and non-living, past and present, collapses. Approach with caution. Do not answer if it calls your name. End of case file. The Raven Hollow case, 1983 to 1986. If you've followed the story of Raven Hollow this far, remember, some places are not meant to be found. Some voices are not meant to be heard. Subscribe if you dare, and turn on notifications because the fog doesn't lift, and they are always watching.